This is the fourth part of our book club discussion on Peter Gärdenfors's book Conceptual Spaces, The Geometry of Thought. I realized today it has a subtitle, so I thought I'd add it.
Very good.
Yeah, proud of myself. Again, joined by Koen Frolichcs.
Hello.
And this is, I said part 4. Today we'll be discussing 2 very brief chapters, the last 2. Chapter 7, computational aspects, and Chapter 8, in chase of space, which is, I guess, a kind of summary or outlook.
Yeah.
And then we'll also have kind of, I guess, a general discussion at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess like last time, this is probably going to be a shorter one because there's just not that much to discuss.
No.
I feel like the 2 chapters are together 30 pages long. And I think we've kind of, I guess, had a general discussion through most of the episodes to some extent. So we'll see. Actually, we had, I usually do, 100 pages per week, right? Which we changed for this one just because it's much denser than the other texts and would have taken forever to read. And, we basically said, like, usually I wanted to do 100 pages per week and talk for an hour. And in this case, I guess we just said, it was like sometimes 90 pages, 30 pages, whatever, right? Yeah, it was 2 chapters, exactly. It really varied. But I realized I just edited the last one. So I think actually if we talk for about 50 minutes today, we'll be pretty much exactly an hour per 100 pages again.
Really?
So it seems like we pretty much matched exactly my.
Your original predictions were just very correct.
Yeah, I didn't, we completely lost the structure, I guess, to some extent, because last time we read 3 times as much as this time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, in terms of density and like ease of reading, like last time wasn't only like 3 times more, it was also like 3 times as hard as it felt like, right?
Yeah, definitely. This was pretty easygoing. Or, I mean, I guess we can do, I'll mention some stuff then later in context rather than now. I guess we should probably start with Chapter 7, computational aspects.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just, I have basically only really one point here, or, I mean, maybe first, I guess, a brief summary is that by computational aspects, and this is something that I had a slightly different expectation when I went into it, he does mean in the kind of fairly literal sense, as in how useful are different kinds of representations for implementations, for computer implementations of cognitive processes.
Yes.
I was kind of thinking that it might be a bit more about like computational neuroscience or something like that, but it's very much actually about the generative part of cognitive science as he defined it. But yeah, the minor point that I had, kind of interesting point I had, is that he never actually mentions this. Actually, probably because this was written in 2000, the book, or published. But it occurred to me that kind of the 3 levels he's talking about are potentially kind of 3 waves of AI. Because AI kind of started off in this kind of symbolic way, right?
Yeah.
There's this kind of, I think the classic, this like somewhat famous description of the first conference or something, where they were like, we're going to like solve these problems.
Oh, do this stuff. Yeah,
exactly that. I don't
do
know
all this,
where that's from. Yeah, we'll do all this thing like this week or something.
Yeah.
And we've made little progress on most of those things until today.
Yeah.
But that was like the very, like, how he describes it also, right? The Turing machines, this kind of symbolic, logical stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure. Yeah.
And currently, I guess we're in another wave of AI with the deep learning stuff, especially with the stuff that DeepMind is doing to a large extent. I guess they're at least maybe the most famous, but I'm sure there are many, many other companies and organizations do similar things. But that's basically what Gärdenfors would call the sub-conceptual level, right? That's the artificial neural networks. And, that started, of course, much earlier, I guess, in the 80s or whenever. But I guess it kind of had like a start, and then they realized, I guess, they didn't have any data to use it. And now they really have data / they're generating themselves when DeepMind creates programs that play chess against each other and that kind of stuff. But it seems to me we're kind of like in that phase right now, where it's still very much neural networks. It's still very much this kind of associative stuff. There's, of course, additions, all sorts of stuff that's been added. But I think that's still kind of generally the scheme. And it seems to me then the next one might be something like the conceptual level. I don't know. I don't work in an AI. But yeah, it's a thought I had.
I just didn't think about this. I actually have to admit that for me, it felt like almost like nothing has changed in the last 20 years, right? When you wrote this book, like a lot of the quotes and stuff like that are still like open questions we have today almost, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Where people, I guess it's like, there's this optimism you said, but also people just saying like, oh, we have to kind of figure this out. And I feel like a lot of this stuff we're still figuring it out, kind of, right?
But I think that might also be because we're still in the second kind of...
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, I mean, you might have...
to some extent. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, it could obviously go completely different ways. I have no idea.
You just don't know, yeah.
Yeah, it could be.
That's very interesting. I mean, it's I kind of got confirmed in my suspicion when he had this quote by John Locke from 1604 or something like that.
Oh, right.
Let me see. Like, I always like, nothing has changed since John Locke. When was it? 1604, I think. Yeah, I can't find it. But it was like, damn. Like,
a while ago,
yeah. Like, at least 1690. Oh, I'm sorry. I lied. 84 years.
Cool. Yeah.
That's not too long ago. I'm sorry.
You almost skipped a century.
Yeah.
But it's still 300 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's a different topic to think about, but like, these a lot of this stuff in chapter 7 from like Patricia Churchland and Sejnowski, that's still very relevant today, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess something we already discussed, like in the early stuff, is that, like in the early chapters, or discussions, is that I guess to some extent this is a weirdly not famous book, at least in the circles we're in, to a large extent. And also Peter Gärdenfors, I don't think many people know him necessarily. But then, actually, let me just check. I think, just so I don't talk nonsense here, I think the book is cited quite a lot.
Okay.
So, Google says it's from 2004.
Yeah, I think there's some...
Oh, it is. The paperback edition from 2004. Okay. Copyright is 2000, but I guess that was probably a hardcover.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, this book has been cited 3,258 times according to Google Scholar. This is a very influential book, and it's also been cited. It's been cited pretty much since like 2005. It's been cited like 150 to 200 times a year. Pretty consistently. So this is not a niche thing, but somehow it's so I wanted to the reason I'm mentioning this is because I wanted to address the point you made about not much has changed.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that to some extent, I think we're just in a field where people haven't really looked at this. Or I don't know. It's really weird because whilst reading like chapter 7 and 8, I did feel sometimes like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I want to do. And these are some people I've heard of before. And then often just I have no idea who these people are. And
yeah.
So it's this really weird thing where to some extent, like, I guess the progress might not have been made because because the people we read and the stuff that we do somehow hasn't quite picked it up as much as other fields maybe.
Yeah, could be.
But yeah,
that's interesting. I mean, because in the beginning, I think in the first episode, we talked about that, because I looked up some papers, like the RSA paper, stuff like that, right? Like the first RSA paper. Like if this book was cited, but it wasn't, right? Which I think because the RSA, that is like conceptual space in a nutshell, right? Maybe not. I mean, but like it definitely uses the same ideas, right? But yeah, for some reason it's not. So you're right. Maybe it just didn't make a big impact in cognitive neuroscience.
Yeah, and I'm just looking right now at kind of who is citing this.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. The second most cited one that's citing this one is a book on, it's called Party Policy in Modern Democracies. No idea why they're citing this.
Sounds interesting though.
So there is one...
Time?
Sorry?
Can we do that book next time?
Exactly. Yeah, it seems to be more the philosophy side that's said. Actually, Koen, you should know. How have you not seen it? So, Representational Geometry, Interrogating Cognition, Computation, and the Brain by Kriegeskorte and Kiewit. Is that how you say it?
It could be.
Dutch.
Oh, okay.
That's the Trends in Cognitive Science 2013 paper. Apparently they're citing this.
Okay, so he does know it. Okay, so I guess there's not enough overlap then for the RSA paper, because if he's aware of it and it would have been relevant for the RSA paper, I guess he would have cited it properly, right? But
Well, they did, right? Or is this a different paper?
It's a different paper. I think it's Kliegeskott and Muir and Bonnettini is the RSA.
Yeah, paper. But I guess it's still, anyway.
I mean, it's still, okay, it is relevant.
It's still,
but
they are kind of citing it. But it seems to me that a lot of, if I just look through the citations here, language of color, I'm not surprised. Meaning changing grammaticalization. I mean, I guess the stuff, it's kind of, I guess you have these like, these small world networks kind of citation patterns, and that's the same here. So the stuff that he's citing in this book, they seem to cite this,
cite him back,
and a bit of stuff we're interested in also, but most of the stuff here, there's language stuff.
I mean, the whole semantics field.
There's some like AI kind of stuff. There's a lot of language stuff here, actually. Most of this seems to be language.
I mean, it's also. Sorry to interrupt.
No, so just to finish that, maybe that thought is just. It seems that maybe. I'm now at the like 70th page of this.
Yeah.
And I've recognized very few names so far.
Yeah, okay.
There's it seems to be like language philosophy kind of people. And now on page 8 we get Jakob Bellmund's paper Navigating Cognition.
Got it.
But that's the second basically that I recognize so far.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so, but I think it might also be because it's not as applicable, right? These are ideas that he tries to put in a framework, but like there's not that much. I mean, there's some examples, but not for, as cognitive scientist, like how do I apply this, right? And I think that it's like interesting to think about, but there's no real life examples, right? I think there's like one study that he cites from himself with the seashells. Right, that's directly applicable, like, but very little that you can just take and put into an experiment, right? So I guess it's a level of abstraction away from what scientists.
Yeah, I mean, like one thing I've said early on, and I'll probably say again later, is that like I find this really interesting, and I think this is gonna be at least a minor part in my thesis, potentially more. Because I do find this stuff really interesting, but I don't exactly have a specific idea right now of what I do or how I do this. It is still kind of a vague idea of like, okay, it seems like it's really cool and I want to spend some time integrating this, but there's no, as you said, it's not like obvious immediately what you would do with this necessarily.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, that was kind of what was fun about chapter 7, because it kind of turned around to stuff, I can kind of understand again, I can relate with again, especially the first half of the chapter. Right, the Churchland, Sejnowski kind of stuff that I've kind of read before or looked at before. That kind of made it like, tangible again, which makes reading it so much easier and, also a little bit more fun. But still, I mean, it's still like a level of abstraction away from the way I like to think about, which is like, can I put this in a matrix and can I do like, an analysis on it kind of, right?
Is there a MATLAB function that will calculate this?
Exactly, yeah. Is it significant?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there was this one quote by Patricia Churchland. I'm not sure if it's.
So you mean 1236?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I highlighted that one.
I mean, yeah, me too. But now I'm thinking, does it fit into what I'm saying now? Let me have a quick read.
I don't know. We can just talk about it anyway, I guess.
Yeah. Should I read the quote, or do you want to do the quote?
Do it.
I do it in my own voice. I will not. I don't know what Patricia Churchland.
Exactly, because you have no idea what she sounds like. You can just randomly, I guess, Koen, you can just randomly take a stereotype of a presumably American woman and pretend, but just do your own voice. It's probably better.
Voice. I therefore propose that the hypothesis that the scattered maps within the cerebral cortex and many subcerebral laminar structures as well are all engaged in the coordinate transformation of points in one neural state space into points in another, by the direct interaction of metrically deformed, vertically connected topographic maps. Their mode of representation is state space position. Their mode of computation is coordinate transformation. Reading a quote on a podcast feels like sitting in school and having to read.
Oh, really? I always reading in school was always the best thing because you could kind of pretend to be engaged without having any idea what was going on in class.
Yeah.
So I was like, who wants to read it? So I always read everything I could in class because
boy.
I didn't have to know what we were actually talking about. I just had to be able to read a section that the teacher told us I should read. So,
well, if there's any young people listening,
if there's any 10-year-olds.
Exactly.
Number one, go to bed. It's probably too late.
Yeah.
And welcome, I guess, to whatever this world is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I like about the quote, let's get back to the quote. I hope I read it well enough that people who didn't will understand. It's this idea of that neurons, when they communicate with each other, right? Like, so let's say you have I imagine a bunch of neurons that are connected that represent something, and by way of communicating to other neurons that a step away, the communication is already the transformation, and this representation changes from one set of neurons to the others, and I find that a very intriguing way of thinking about the brain, right? So like visual cortex, we kind of know. I'm not sure if we know, but it kind of happens there, right? From layer 1. Or from V1, to V2, V3, there is these transformations that are happening, and it must be from the neurons in layer 1 communicating it to layer 2. They do these transformations, and I think that's
layer or
sorry, not layer. Yeah, V1 to V2, not like cortical layers, of course. I'm sorry. Yeah. And for some, I find that a very interesting idea. I think it's really cool. But then also, this is already slightly abstract of but how do I test it, right? That's me coming in.
Yeah,
right?
okay, that's kind of the point you made. Yeah, I guess that is a good point because I also highlighted that quote in particular because, I think what I want to do in the next few years is kind of see how people in these social interactions make decisions that have outcomes for them and for others, and kind of how you integrate all that different information and kind of how you just use that to make a decision. And so when I highlighted that, it's this is what I think I will be working on for the next few years, but I'm aware that this is a more general question than just about social interactions, right?
Sure.
It's a kind of more general question about how the brain uses and transforms information to some extent.
Totally.
Put it in a really broad way. And so when I read this, I was like, oh yeah, here we go. But you're right. It doesn't lend itself immediately to some sort of experiment or something. It's just a general way of thinking about it or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and even an fMRI can't capture this, right? Probably. Who knows?
Maybe that's the next thing. Yeah. Maybe. Who knows?
Yeah,
but
you can do
stuff. I guess wasn't made for fMRI because I guess the stuff that the kind of fields where you look at, I think the fields that have done more when it comes to this kind of stuff are the fields where you can measure single neurons and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like animal literature, you mean like exactly. The grid cells came from rats. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, but even lower level stuff, right? Where I think a lot of this computational, I think the really precise computational neuroscience, where you can really measure stuff precisely comes from when you can.
Yeah, you have a very accurate representation. This is what this one neuron does, and then you can model that, make it multiple, whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah. No,
and totally. I think I guess it's to some extent also the interesting stuff about cognitive computational neuroscience, right? Where this is just an open question, how do you do this with the methods we have? Can you approximate this or whatever, right?
Yeah, totally.
So I think to some extent it's also just a sign that our field, I guess, is not quite as far as others that started. I guess fMRI has been around since 1990 roughly. So, whereas we've been able to record single cells for quite a while.
Sure. So, yeah. I guess the field is maturing and we're borrowing a lot from other disciplines. Or I guess we got along quite a way with borrowing, and now we kind of, I'm not sure if physics has some way of it's different, right? It's we're measuring different things and we're trying to represent different things. I don't know. I just don't know enough. Talking out of my ass.
Yeah.
But, we can't borrow. Yeah. No, but we can't borrow ideas.
The feature gas goes straight from Koen's ass to your ears.
Yeah. Why do you always turn my camera off? You don't.
Anyway, sorry, you were saying.
No. Like I'm just saying, like we got along quite well with borrowing from other disciplines, right? Like computational cognitive neuroscience is borrowing from mathematics and physics. How did they model the world? Can we adapt it to neurons and stuff like that? And yeah, I guess this is not even modeling because we can model single neurons, but measuring vast amount of single neurons, preferably in humans, preferably in deeper cortex, or not just the motor cortex, which you do for like this ECOG patients, right? The epilepsy. Yeah, right. That you can do like a little bit of human single cell recording, or like I guess.
I think that's usually like temporal cortex and that kind of stuff because for some reason, that's where those seizures originate. Well, it's not just like you don't have it just over there, but apparently I think it's often temporal cortex. And or temporal lobes, whatever you want to call it, and then you you get some area around it, so you do get motor cortex and prefrontal cortex and that kind of stuff. But but it depends on the patient,
Totally.
But I guess the point is also that to some extent our field is on the conceptual level, whereas the stuff that we just discussed in single cell studies, whatever, that's more the subconceptual level, right? So to some extent, also we just need a new. I mean, maybe that is what we're doing. Maybe that is what all these fMRI analyses are doing. They're just adding the appropriate new way of thinking about these kind of things and collecting and analyzing data that you can't just take one-to-one from other fields.
Sure. That I mean, probably. Yeah.
But I guess neuroscientists, are more like magpies, where we just take the cool stuff from other fields and just like the shiny stuff, and we just nick it. And maybe we have to have our own thoughts. I don't know. Let's hope not. We're screwed. We need our own thoughts.
Yeah. Peter, write a new book. Come on, we need ideas.
Can you please be a bit more applied this time?
Exactly. Could you try to so we can like implement it, get some good publications.
I think that might be, I don't remember it now because now it's been a bit since I've read Jakob Bellmund's paper. I guess that is something that goes more towards making it applicable and understandable to people like us. I mean, that's, a 5-page review or something. So obviously you're not going to get too much from it in the, it's an introduction and a summary. But I mean, this is a book, a philosophical book by a philosopher that seems to be most interesting to philosophers and linguists. But I think, I mean, that's what I find interesting, right? That also that you go this like you read this and think, okay, this is really cool. But almost to me, like the fascination comes almost from that it's not immediately obvious what you should do, right?
I guess
there is a bit of mystery, a bit of like, I wonder how this fits, or whether it fits, or
I mean, that, and just taking you out of your comfort zone a little bit, right? Like the trying to comprehend something that is not straightforward right away. Like it's very related, but like you do have to like kind of like have a different view angle or whatever. And I think that's very good for us to like, look at stuff from a slightly different angle, like almost literally, and like be like, hey, but if I look at my stuff from this angle, will it like give me a new, better viewpoint? I mean, he even said it in the last chapter, like the most breakthroughs have happened in science when people got a new way of representing data that gave it a nice structure, like something like that. I don't know. It's not in.
He said that several times also previously when he basically said, I think almost like what science is figuring out new dimensions or something like that. Yeah. Anyway, so we talk about chapter 8 then. I guess we're already kind of moving. We've been moving it towards it quite a bit already. Yeah. I guess chapter 8 is just a summary. I think the two main points kind of I wrote out here as a summary of it are that conceptual spaces are a bridge between symbolic and subconceptual representations, and that it's not, one or the other, but it's kind of you need all of them and they have to interact. And the second point is, I guess, something that we've discussed or mentioned briefly a few times, that this book, I think at first we thought like, it's kind of cool that he mentions stuff that they haven't figured out yet. But then in the in chapter 8, he explicitly mentioned this is probably more like a research program rather than a theory. And then I was like, right. That's a good way of putting it, because this is very much a kind of like, here's a whole way of thinking and we can apply it to all this kind of stuff. Rather than here's my theory of gravity or whatever.
Yeah. This is like a finished thing, and it applies to everything, kind of, right? Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're right.
I mean, that was also like that point was also kind of cool to me for my again for my thesis. I mean, I haven't started writing yet, so to some extent, it feels kind of silly mentioning it, and talking about it if I haven't really done anything yet. But to some extent, I feel like I also want to do something a little bit in the idea of saying like, hey, these transformations I'm interested in, this is the kind of stuff that's cool and that could be cool to do in the future. Almost, and using the stuff I have done in my PhD almost more as examples.
Yeah.
And I don't know, when I read it, I thought like, I'm going to remember this word. I'm going to put this in there somewhere, at the very least as an excuse for why I'm not precise enough.
Yeah.
At the very least, it's a good caveat at the end. Like, by the way, if this wasn't precise enough, it's more of a research program.
It's not really like a theory. Yeah, exactly. Imagine Christopher having Christopher supervisor having two of like both our dissertation on his desk with both the same ending, going like, it's more like
It also literally is like he handed this in the same time. I don't know who plagiarized whom.
Exactly.
Has to fail his thesis.
No, we just
But it is also, I guess like when we think about, or I guess when I think about science and stuff that people publish, I think I do still have this notion that you publish your finished stuff. You say, this is my experiment, this is what I found, this is conclusive. Here's my fully fledged theory with formal model and everything.
Yeah.
But obviously that's not how it works, right?
No.
I mean, and I know, like, I've read papers where you read a paper and you go like, oh, okay, this is like step one, basically, or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is kind
of just reading it as a book like this just felt, I don't know, the kind of thing you kind of already have understood to like 95%, but then someone just hits it, or like hammers home the point. He doesn't hammer on it, he just mentions it, right? But that kind of just makes it that little bit more obvious than it maybe was before.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and maybe just the last point I have about this is that the questions at the end, and this is kind of cool and kind of disappointing, we kind of covered most of them in our discussions before, it seemed to me. So he kind of at the end says like, oh, here's some interesting questions for the future and that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
There was one in particular where I thought like, yeah, we've literally talked about this on the podcast. So for example, page 260, one of the points is, which are the best dimensions, the best topology, the best metric to be used for representing a particular cognitive process? I think I literally asked you almost that question like 2 episodes back or something, where I was like, what's really interesting? Like, it's cool to hear this, but like, how do you know which one you should use and that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird, like seeing the questions, like a lot of them we covered already. It's like, like it's cool that we covered them, but also kind of wanted something new now.
Oh, like that. Yeah, I know. Yeah, sure. But I think this is also like, because they're kind of very broad questions that you can probably reapply to almost all problems you have, right? Mm-hmm. Like, okay, so I have like, I have like this theory, or like I have like this, let's say, cognitive process. How is it represented? Like, and then the next question is, how are the representations between, this cognition, like this thing of cognition and these other, like, connected? How are they connected?
Yeah.
What are the dynamics? How should it be modeled? Like, I feel like it's also very broad.
Yeah, they're kind of generic questions.
Very, yeah. Kind of
like
Sorry, no, I mean, like, kind of like, if you follow like this framework, quote unquote, of like conceptual spaces, that's kind of the questions you want to have fulfilled or answered at the end, right? Of your experiment.
I mean, that's kind of what I find cool about this, is that he doesn't do this explicitly per se, but when you follow this book and you want to apply to your own stuff, it almost provides you with a bit of almost like a checklist in terms of questions you should ask, which is what are the dimensions, how are they measured, how do you measure distances in your thing, and all this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah,
where it's just like natural questions that you have now and that you can always ask when you're doing something, and even if they're not really useful, they might at least make you think of something interesting or something
Definitely. And I think that's also for me that I don't know exactly what I said anymore in the beginning. I didn't write this down, kind of what I wanted from this book. I think we asked each other, but that's kind of, maybe I've transformed into that. But like, that was also for me the idea, just get a new viewpoint, right? Get have a different look, something refreshing. Well, maybe not refreshing, but just like another person's ideas. And I think, if I can talk about the book as a whole, I think that
I think we can move towards that unless you have something about chapter 8.
Yeah, no, I mean, chapter 10 or chapter 8 is anyways like kind of summarizing.
Yeah, is it already that, yeah.
But yeah, I guess that's in itself in a whole, like maybe not these questions specifically, but also like, this distance metric, right? Not just Euclidean distance is valid. I guess, I kind of, had some ideas about this already, but like also the city block metric.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff, right? That's very interesting to just have added to my repertoire or whatever to think
exactly.
about.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to think about it. A kind of repertoire of questions and things you can ask. And I mean, to some extent, of course, this stuff might be almost too much detail because like another thing I had is like, okay, so now you have these kind of Cartesian spaces, then also in that sense, I guess, at least you think about linear usually, right? You just add up stuff or not. But it can obviously also be non-linear. But then it gets very complicated very quickly and it becomes too difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it might, what I mean is like there might be like, you already have way too many questions. Like the first one enough is almost like what are the dimensions and how do you measure them is almost like that's going to take you like a few years or something.
You're satisfied. Yeah.
But I really like this stuff, and it feels like, I guess it helps you situate or contextualize what you're doing to some extent, because it's not just here's my question I'm interested in, but you can say like here's the question I'm interested in, and we can measure it in these different ways, and they have this or that implication if we do it this way, and then it just becomes like, I feel like a bit more fully fledged, if you want to put it that way, versus before maybe being slightly unaware of exactly the context in which you're doing this, or it's not exactly the word I mean, but yeah, I can't find the precise thing what I want to say, but I think for me this is definitely going to be something that, as I said right in the beginning of today's episode, I definitely want to spend some time with this for my thesis, and I think I would definitely include this, not just in passing, but at least as a like minor section somewhere.
Yeah,
and
like truly as a separate section, like the conceptual space of
maybe. I guess that depends, like how. I guess. So what I mean is like I think this is definitely going to be more than just blah 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 metrics brackets Gärdenfors 2000 close bracket, right? It's going to be more than that. It's definitely going to be mentioned in like a paragraph or something.
Okay.
But who knows? Maybe as an entire like chapter, or I mean, I have no idea like what structure.
Yeah. No. I mean, it's just stupid too.
Yeah, exactly. Also, depending on how you choose, you might have like 4 chapters or 20. Like, I have no idea. Like,
it's a lot of stuff.
But I definitely think this is going to be. I'm going to mention this, and to some extent, this might build the kind of theoretical backbone, maybe to some extent, in the same way that Ma builds a kind of theoretical backbone.
Yeah.
So I think for me, depending on how I think about this in the next few months, I think this might be one of the theoretical background within I discuss the things I'm interested in. Maybe that's a way of putting it.
Okay. Well, very interesting. I just because I just want to ask, like, do you think you'll ever completely reread this book, or do you think you will maybe like pick sections now?
Probably. I mean, I'm probably not going to read the entire thing through.
Yeah.
I'm not going to. There's no point in reading the entire semantics chapter again, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was.
I would definitely read. I mean, I don't know. Let's see. I mean, I'm pretty sure I'll read the first 2 chapters again.
Yeah.
Also, now that we've read everything, because they are, also kind of fairly general. I could imagine reading chapters 3 and then I'll probably I think the first 4 chapters really are the meat and bones of the book. I think the rest, maybe like chapter 7 and 8 have some good stuff in it. And actually, I wanted to mention this last time, I forgot. To some extent, I feel like it's good that I've read chapter 5 and 6, even if I'm not going to take anything directly from this. Whilst I was reading it, it felt like, to some extent, this probably is going to influence my thinking, or like some ideas that are in here that I haven't thought about quite so much so far, and that I'm probably not picking up 100%. I don't know. It just felt like this might somehow, like, I don't know whether you know what I mean, but like the kind of idea that you're not using it now and you might never use it directly, but somehow it's influencing your thinking a little bit.
It's there. Subconceptual spaces you're talking about. It's the next book. volume
exactly.
2.
But
no, yeah, I know what you mean.
I had that with semantics and induction, where I thought like, I might like have similar thoughts in the future and pretend they're my own.
As a good scientist.
Yeah, but no, I think I'll definitely read at least 1 or 2 chapters of this again, probably more or less.
Yeah.
Obviously in the skim stuff, but yeah, I think so.
No, very good. Cool.
I'm assuming you too, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think very, very similar to you, actually. I mean, in the beginning, I was also just very excited, right? So I guess there's also like, but I do think, yeah, chapters 1, 2, definitely, maybe 3, 4 to kind of, I mean, I think what has great merit, I mean, and I've said this before now, so it's just like seeing how other people do stuff a little different. And I think, I sometimes, I get a little bit stuck in the current paradigm.
The Frolichs way of doing things.
Yeah.
The Frolichs paradigm.
Oh God, it's such a stubborn.
It's a very vague.
Yeah.
Ill-defined.
Ill-defined. Yeah. And you just talk a lot. It's how do you call it? Obfuscation. You just talk a lot, so people just don't know anymore what you're talking about. No, but you're right. I mean, I do enjoy some ways of thinking about it, and I think that's how I will use it. I'm not sure, because I am kind of, in the conceptual space already. So I guess, for me to say like I'll add it is kind of a, I hope I will. I need like talk about spaces and representations. But yeah, how exactly? Like, I feel like you're also thinking more about your thesis already than I am, or like in a different way, maybe.
I think maybe I think I'm thinking about it a different way, because I mean, this might be completely wrong, but to me it seems a bit as if from the beginning your thesis was a bit clearer, or your topic of your PhD to some extent, because it was about learning about personality traits, that kind of stuff, which of course gives huge amounts of flexibility how you frame it, etc. But I think for me it was fairly much I think for me the beginning was, okay, we're going to do cooperation and social decision making, and we kind of want to go away from like just using the standard paradigms. But it was pretty vague from the beginning.
Yeah,
so I think I really
you
had
need a bit more direction.
I mean, not needed. It's just like, that's what I wanted to do. And it's just, for me, it's been because I didn't have really a theme, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's just been something I've been thinking about pretty much since the beginning.
It makes sense.
Because it's like, what is my thesis? Like, where is this? Where am I going here?
Where am I?
Am I just running in circles? Or? And yes, I am.
Yes, we often find Ben outside screaming with his shirt
running
off.
in a circle.
Yeah.
Those are the good days, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. To some extent, it feels like I know roughly what I want to do for my thesis, but then again, once I start writing, I probably realize it's all bullshit. Now I have to start again.
Yeah. No, yeah, but that's fine. That's really fine. I mean, it's just, I think it's, it's fun and it's good to read and think about it, right? That's how you get there, right? You won't.
Yeah. So we'll see how much of this makes it into it. But yeah, I think also, as you kind of mentioned, like to some extent, we already are in the conceptual space. I guess we just weren't quite aware of it, or at least I wasn't.
Yeah.
Right. Like this, to some extent, this is kind of what we're doing already. It's just we never quite made it as explicit and weren't quite as aware of. Right.
No, I totally agree. I think I just agree with you. That's why I wasn't saying anything. I could only think about some stoner going like, yeah, man, you're there all the time, man. Yeah.
Or if that's who you are, then just say that then. Yeah. Okay. So I guess we're to some extent coming to the end, but of discussion of the book in general and the
I think so,
book club discussion. So I think maybe as a kind of summary, I think this is a really cool book. I mean, I guess we've kind of, it's funny, like I guess a lot of the stuff we talked about was kind of critical. It's like, yeah, this kind of sucked, or this wasn't clear, and it's a bit abstract. I don't really know what he meant. But I think in general, I think we both like the book quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously you're not going to like everything about it.
That's fair.
But yeah, as we said, I think it's a really cool perspective and clarifies or it forces you to clarify things yourself almost more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So actually one thing, maybe my last kind of point is that, I mentioned earlier kind of my bold prediction of AI.
Yeah.
And to some extent, I think the same is happening in cognitive neuroscience, right? Where, as you mentioned, you also mentioned this last time, like a lot of the early stuff was about language and semantics and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The semantic stuff he cites in here is usually the older stuff from like the 60s and 70s or something.
Sure.
And, then I guess AI and cognitive neuroscience have gone somewhat in parallel. Then you had like, back propagation and that kind of stuff in the 80s and 90s and that kind of stuff. And it's obviously still going, of course. But it seems to me, I guess the question I wrote down is, are we entering the age of conceptual spaces?
Oh, boy.
It's a good way of putting it, right?
Yeah.
And I guess to some extent, that's the question I asked for AI. But I also wonder whether that's the what's happening basically in cognitive neuroscience, where we've kind of been doing it for like 10, 15 years, I guess, but maybe a lot of people not quite as explicitly aware of that is what's happening.
I mean, it's a hard... I'm a little bit stunted by the question because I don't know from where to approach it, right? I mean, yes, like I think for the past 10, 15 years, I think it's been kind of like, these I think everyone has always been interested in how is stuff represented in the brain, right? And I think also with the new methodologies and stuff like that, we are able to start to have a look at it. As we just said, but then fMRI is very coarse, right? EEG, like you can't really use it for that as much, I would say. But I'm also not really
probably,
EEG
I don't know. Yeah,
I mean, you probably can. You can do some stuff, right? Depends. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we might be. I think now... But I think we might even be, like, conceptually, we might be ahead of what we can actually measure, maybe. Right? Sure. I guess there's these dynamic, what's it called again? Dynamic conceptual, no. Okay. Do you know what I'm talking about at all? Like, where you basically, like, look at groups of neurons coding, and then you try to, like, do a dimensionality reduction on the coding. So you then look at, like, how neurons kind of behave in a less... Oh God, yeah, I can't, I'm know already, like, it's not in the tip of my tongue anyway, so we're kind of getting there. I mean, I think you can keep it in, like, we're kind of getting there with, like, new ways of looking at, like, new ways of, like, using mathematics and stuff like that. We're trying to get there, but I think what we also, like, would really benefit from is, more fine, better ways of measuring the brain, right? Non-invasive.
And I think that's, to some extent, always been the case, right? I mean, I think that's pretty much the case, I think, with most of science, actually, that most of the breakthroughs happen after someone invents a tool with which you can measure something you could measure before.
Sure.
I think the best example here, whilst we're talking about spaces, is that John O'Keefe it was a few years after someone, I think it might have been James Franco, I can't remember, but someone developed electrodes where the mouse could move.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then John O'Keefe just put
him in a maze.
I'm sure this is all that happened. He just put a mouse in a box or a rat in a box and said, "Come on, move.
Do your thing."
Nobel Prize." That's how it works. Yeah, but that happens with most of the things. I think to some extent, it's kind of cool and also kind of frustrating. To me, it seems to me like most scientific advance or a lot of scientific advance happens just because people figure out how to measure something.
Which I guess is fair. But then again, like, I mean, it's also like this question already. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm kind of drifting away from your question. Like, what should we measure now, right? I mean, yeah, sure, like single cell recordings, like, but not invasively, like, or like, it seems also abstract, right?
I think that's a good thing. For what we want to do doesn't necessarily make sense.
Yeah, I mean, like, unless you can do like single cell recordings for every neurons in like a patch, like a piece of cortex.
No, right? I mean more in a conceptual way, that not like conceptual spaces way, but concept in the like generic term. The kind of stuff we're interested in isn't necessarily the stuff that you will find represented in individual neurons. Mm-hmm. I wonder, because you have, that's how grid cells, plate cells, blah blah blah, and even the concept cells that Jennifer Aniston cell and whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. You can do it, but to some extent, there's also the question of whether some of the stuff is represented more in terms of large numbers of neurons interacting with each other.
Yeah, definitely.
A single neuron coding for something.
Yeah.
So for some of the stuff we're interested in, single neurons don't even make sense to measure.
No, I just meant it as in like fMRI, but then you can measure all the single neurons. I guess I would give you information overload, but
okay, yeah.
I mean, yeah, I went all the way.
Yeah, Koen, I have 100 billion
petabytes.
Like my vector of neural activity is 100 billion long. What do I do with this?
Yeah. You transpose it, and
Then you wait a week.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then MATLAB like sends you an angry email. No, you're right. I mean, things have to go hand in hand. To come back to your question, yes, I do think probably we're in the conceptual spaces era a little bit, like we're trying to figure it out. But yeah, I guess there's a lot of stuff going on in general. I think there's a lot of people doing a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah, of course. I like that he had this phrase. I don't know exactly how he put it, but I just wrote down the phrase hunt for hidden conceptual spaces. That's kind of what researchers should do. You should hunt for your hidden conceptual spaces and discover new ones and show how they relate to other things. I like that idea. And I guess we'll see whether that's what we'll do or not.
Who knows?
Maybe we start doing it and realize it's all nonsense. I have no idea. Right now, we haven't actually used any of the stuff we've read about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, let's see. Maybe in 10 years, we'll know.
Okay, let's do part 5 in 10 years. We'll find an answer.
We should do part 5 is the end of your thesis. Has it been integrated into your thesis, and then
it's just going to be 10 seconds where it says, so part 5, and has it in, and no.
I'm kind of like, I'm crying a lot. I'm very frustrated.
This book was a waste of time.
Yeah.
I wasted 3 months trying to put this into my thesis. It didn't work. Now I'm homeless. Anyway.
That's a great ending.
Yeah, I mean, maybe apart from that, maybe we can, one brief thing, that I always do is very briefly discussing what it was like to discuss this book on the podcast. I mean, so you've done a previous one now, which was slightly different, was, I mean, for those who haven't listened to it, it was a Jack Reacher book, which is a kind of 500-page thriller, I guess, that is very plot-driven and very easy to read.
Yeah.
And this is for last time, I think we did 100 pages a week and then said probably should have done 150 to 200 because it's so easy to read. This time we did, 60 pages a week pretty much on average. Well, pretty much exactly 60 pages per week on average. And so what, I don't know, maybe I'll just ask you, was it easy to discuss this on the podcast, or how did you? I don't know, because it's very different than the other books I've done so far.
Yeah, I did struggle a little bit, like, especially like how, like, what will you discuss? Will you discuss the content directly, right? Like specific, things he explains or he tries to get you to understand, or do you talk more, a little bit more global, which I feel like that's what we did more now. Yeah. Right. A little bit more, which also makes sense because, like, if you go into detail, it just, you get lost probably and it takes way too long. Yeah, but I mean, overall, I had fun. I think, a book like this, which is just a little bit difficult sometimes, it's also just good to have, a reason to, you have to finish it. So might as well read it tonight, kind of, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But
I mean, like, what I just found difficult, I guess, is that in the 3 books I've done so far, I mean, 2 of them were novels and the third was a biography. All of those are very plot driven. Stuff happens. Their actions. For example, even in the last one with the Humboldt biography, we could laugh at Humboldt basically being bitten by mosquitoes all day when he was in the Amazon rainforest and just having an absolutely miserable life. Or of, him like wanting to go on a great adventure again, and basically he had to wait like 20 years or 30 years because countries were at war with each other all the time. And he just couldn't make it happen. Damn. Yeah, because if you want to like make a far journey, and you're German, and the country you want to go in is at war with Germany, then maybe don't go there.
Yeah.
If it's like 1820 or whatever. So, you have like these things that are so easy to understand, so obvious. Whereas, this is sometimes very much, he's trying to make a complicated point. And he's trying to make it easy, I would assume, but it's still complicated. So I don't know. I mean, I guess we don't know what it's like to listen to this, but hopefully it helps to some extent.
Which is probably horrible.
It's just misery.
This will be like in Guantanamo Bay when, instead of like Metallica, they'll like have us jab on blabber on for an hour.
Yeah, there's just 3 people, and there's probably like 2 or 3 people who just, I don't know, are in locked-in syndrome, and someone accidentally left like the podcast like from a previous episode on, it just runs through. So someone's just lying in hospital bed going, oh God, please make it stop.
Not again. Especially if you're
there's part 4.
There's part 4, and like especially if you're like a semantic philosopher, right? And we just like shat on, and you're just like, no, you're just misunderstanding everything, you bunch of idiots. Yeah,
exactly. When I get out of this locked-in syndrome, I'm gonna fuck you up.
Yeah. I'll find you and I'll hurt you. Yeah. If so, I'm sorry for your predicament.
Yes.
I wish you all the best.
And for those who don't know what it's like, there's a great book about locked-in syndrome called "The Butterfly and the Bell" by what's it called, Jean-Dominique Bauby, something like that.
It's in French, isn't it?
Yeah. Also a very good film by Julian Schnabel. Anyway. I think if we're starting to ramble that far, then maybe we should
end it.
So yeah, thank you for listening, and I guess go read the book. It's interesting, and
it's worth the $33, however much we pay.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, for you it was 30 because you only gave me 30 back. But yeah,
that's the price of my.
Right, that's your loan for yeah, exactly. That's the hourly wage is not good.
My hourly wage is shit. I'm a PhD student.
2.5 hours of recording. Yeah, it's still better than your PhD salary.
Yeah. Okay, Ben.
Anyway,
it was good talking to you.